The ocean chose you.
I thought it was a dream.
Nope.
Howdy, Theologian.
Howdy.
Are you ready?
For what?
Do you feel chosen?
No. Allergic to that word,
Oh, really?
theologically speaking.
But I do love Moana.
It is a great kids movie.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it was a good human movie.
No, there's definitely a category of kids movies where I put all of those Disney movies into that category.
It was like so meaningful for many grown-ups I know.
Was it meaningful for you?
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah,
Well,
a lot.
liking it and meaningful.
I thought I was very impacted by it. Like at the end where she like walks up to Fiti and like puts but it's like Taka, and it's like
What?
she realizes that all she had was the heart stolen from her. She wasn't a monster.
Yeah.
And
That's
she's
true.
like-
It is powerful.
And she like confronts it and like,
Yeah.
saves the day.
Yeah. Have you been to Disney World?
I've been to Disney. The answer is yes, but as like a teenager.
Did you
I've
like
been to
it?
Disneyland more recently with my children. It was
Did you
amazing.
like it?
I really did like Disneyland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I want to go to Disney World next year with my kids.
Well, ugh.
Oh.
Just looks so hard.
I know. You have to like gird your loins and just decide you're doing it and then go for it.
Yeah.
You just have to like go knowing it's going to be like horrible and also amazing.
And expensive.
Yeah, I know. That's the hard part.
The reason I asked is just because you seem to really favor a lot of Disney movies.
Well, I do have children that watch a lot of Disney movies right now.
Yeah, Declan's really in a Minions phase.
Oh, yeah. My kids like the Despicable Me,
Yeah.
like clumping of movies, but,
New one coming out here soon.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that has anything to do with baptism.
No, it doesn't. But Moana does, because not only is it this concept of like being claimed and chosen,
Yes.
but water, hello,
Obvi.
the ocean like
Yes.
douses her
Yeah, totally.
in water multiple times. So I actually like that scene. I never thought about it until I was like looking at it for this podcast, but that scene, she like gets baptized by the ocean in that moment.
Yeah, I guess she does.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then it's like she
No,
like
it
starts
fits.
on her
It's
journey.
Good. It's good. I like it.
Yep.
I like the connection. And I think that the unique thing about the thing about baptism is it's not that unique. Like water is life, regardless of like what culture, what faith you grow up in. Like there is sort of this reverence of water and rituals using water.
Yeah.
And so like there's sort of a universalization of the act of being washed clean, of being like reborn, or like of having life. And I think that it's like a really powerful example of that. Like I would imagine that, regardless of how you've come to understand baptism as a Christian, you can see that film and find the meaning in that, even though it's not, specifically a baptism.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think one of the things that I always say to kids, but honestly to adults too, is before they get baptized, or if I'm talking to them about baptism, I always start with, what do we use water for in our everyday life? Like that's, if you want to understand baptism, start with water. Start with understanding how we use water and how we engage with water and what water does. And there's something really neat when you start with these elements, these physical, tangible, like visceral elements that we see all around us, that we have like easy access to. Well, and I'm not trying to
not everyone, but
right.
yeah.
And I'm not also trying to say that there isn't we shouldn't be concerned with the scarcity of water, but essentially there's water that just exists in nature for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we can engage with it in this really ordinary thing becomes really extraordinary when we bring it into the ritual, the sacramental ritual of baptism.
Yeah.
And the same thing with bread and juice, right? Ordinary, easy to access, relatively, kind of take it for granted, or, it is this thing that almost every culture has some sort of baked thing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's okay, this ordinary thing that you see almost every day becomes really sacred.
Of the ordinary. Yeah.
So that's what, again, in general, when we talk about sacraments, I think there's some real power in talking about the ordinary becoming sacred.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in baptism, especially because it's this kind of also this moment of recognizing that we, as ordinary as we are all of a sudden claimed and named, and we kind of become part of this sacred identity of the body of Christ. And so I think that there's really something powerful with that. But starting with water, is
really important when we talk about baptism.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's the place to start.
And the sort of multiple ways we use water.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. So again, sacraments, things that Jesus told us to do.
And
we talked last week about Holy Communion, but Jesus told us to go and baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Right.
And that's at the end of the Gospel of Matthew. We have that command, that commission, often called the Great Commission.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons that for us, communion and then baptism
or sacraments
is a sacrament.
Right.
I don't know of any Christian church that baptizes that doesn't consider it a sacrament.
I don't either.
But there are Christian churches that have more sacraments than we do as United Methodists. And I do want to say a note real fast. I meant to say this last week, but Jesus told us to do a lot of things.
That's true.
And in one of the Gospels, Jesus tells us specifically to wash feet.
Correct.
As I have washed your feet, so you must wash each other's.
Yep.
And yet we don't have foot washing as a sacrament.
That's true.
And in the Catholic Church, they have things like marriage as a sacrament and ordination as a sacrament.
Last rites.
And last rites as a sacrament. And so it's interesting, in the Catholic Church, it's very difficult to actually participate in all the sacraments because their priests can't marry. So if you can't be ordained as a priest and also married, now there's some technicalities that you can
but in general,
do to get around that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general. And so as United Methodists, we've, and most Protestants, I would say, have kind of focused on these two. I think primarily because they are the ones that Jesus himself participated in all of the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah. No, that's absolutely,
his Last Supper is a little bit different in John.
Yes.
But it's there.
And it is in Matthew, Luke, and Mark for sure.
Yeah.
And Jesus' own baptism is throughout the Gospels.
And in the letters of the early church, we have reference to both baptism and communion.
Correct.
And we don't have reference to a lot of the other things.
Specifically in the book of Acts, we see it as both being foundational to the structure of the church and the growth of the church. Baptism is pretty quick out of the gate.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you have Peter essentially explaining what's happening at Pentecost. Everyone sort of comes to believe and they're baptized, and the church is off and running. And then you have
individual stories of baptism. Yeah.
You also have the sharing of a meal, right?
Yeah.
Early on in Acts. So I think that you're right. Jesus tells us to do a lot of things. But these two things in particular are essentially an understanding of identity and a invitation to grace, right? Especially for us as United Methodists who don't believe in believers' baptism, the identity piece is
wait. We don't believe in only
exclusively believers' baptism,
correct.
right? Which we believe that a
You can be
profession of
baptized
faith should lead to a baptism if one has not yet been baptized. But believers' baptism as a
limiting
act, as it's sort of traditionally understood, that's why we baptize infants, right?
Right.
Or we baptize folks with different cognitive abilities.
Right.
So, so it's really important to note that, like, there's an identity piece there that's beyond or before recognition, but that's a really important part of what it means to be a part of the church, and then the sort of ongoing participation in communion is also, access to God's grace in a unique, very specific way.
Yeah. So starting with water, I talk about how water gives life, as you said. Like, we have to have water
to live. And other things.
Yes, and other things, but we have to have water to live. It cleanses. So we wash with it. We get ourselves clean with it. We clean other things with it. I talked about how water is a source of energy. It has power and is often translated into like empowering other things, right? You think of the electricity that we get from water, running water, or moving water, right?
It creates through stone. Yeah.
It has power to reshape, to reform. Like, you think of rivers through, in a canyon, like that canyon's created over millennia because water has like cut through it. So it has like this power to it. It's fun. We have a lot of fun in water. I actually talk about that, especially with kids.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, like we go swimming, we celebrate, like we enjoy it. Yeah. So I really start with that, and I think so when we use water in baptism, what water does for us, like externally, we believe that that's what the water is symbolizing, what God is doing for us internally. So we're having new life. We have life. We are born again, in a way, and are claimed in that way. We have fun. It's a party. There's a celebration aspect to this.
Yeah, totally.
And there's power in it. There's power
Real
to
power.
Transform, to empower, to be empowered. So I really love kind of starting there when we talk about baptism. And I think it's important to think through all of those different things that God is doing in baptism, because often I think, and to the detriment of, I think, a lot of people's maybe confidence in their faith, or even like their understanding of kind of of what baptism means and like what that can lead them to in their faith. They look at baptism in a very small way, in a very like, it only cleanses me of sin, and that's all it does. And so they look at baptism as like this very narrow, like small thing, and I feel like it limits then what God can actually do in baptism, and does do in baptism.
I was about to say, not can, is, right?
Yeah,
is actually happening in baptism. Yeah, no, I agree with that. When we take the sacrament of baptism and only refer to it as a cleansing that happens during a profession of faith, or for those who rebaptize, in sort of that same vein, we limit both what God is doing in the person's life. We limit how they have access to that by refusing to talk about it, but we also limit how the community participates in the act itself too, right? And that's why, as United Methodist, we're not, I wouldn't say never, it's a pretty standard practice for baptism to happen within the community.
Yeah,
right?
there is always representation of the community there. I mean, obviously, it's not like we're like, oh, all of our church members aren't here, or we're not going to baptize you. Like, we do it in community.
And there are instances where baptism,
happens with a smaller group, representative of the body.
Right.
But there's always a representative of the body there.
Correct. And it's And I think like that aspect of the sacrament is really important, because we think of communion as the only sacrament that we get to participate on an ongoing basis. And it's easy to look at baptism as something rather voyeuristic, where we're just watching someone else have that experience. But that's not what is happening
actually true at all.
Right. That's not what's happening in baptism. What we're promising to do, especially for infants, but really regardless of age, is that we're promising to walk alongside that individual so that they grow up to claim the faith as their own.
Yeah.
Right. Or they mature in their sort of faith journey, and that we will help them do that. And so we participate in the sacrament of baptism every time a baptism occurs within our community. But we do not rebaptize.
No.
And why do we not rebaptize them?
Because God didn't get it wrong the first time.
That's right.
because God is the actor in baptism. It's God's power is what's moving this, is like the efficacy of it, right? The effect of baptism is only because of God's power. So, and God's presence. So if God did this at one point, then we don't ever have to redo it. And so this is, I use this analogy again a lot with kids, but it's such a good one that I think it works for adults too. I always ask kids, like, have you ever been on a team, like a sports team or a dance team, or, a mathletes team, like any sort of team? There's always a point where you're not on the team and then you are on the team. And so it's a boundary, right? Like you cross from not being on the team to being on the team. And you have to either do something, whether it's sign a piece of paper or your parents fill out a form or you submit your name or you try out or something. And there's always that boundary. So for us, what we say is look, baptism is like joining the team. It's like you're getting on the team of the church, right? The body of Christ. But with God, you're actually already on the team. And so baptism is more like the jersey presentation ceremony, where you're on the team already, but you're getting the jersey and everyone else knows you're on the team, and it's like official, and we see you put the jersey on, and it's like, the God's name on the front and your last name on the back, right? So with God, it's like you're already on the team. You didn't have to do anything to get on the team.
Here's your participation trophy.
God, you're on the team.
Yeah.
But baptism is that moment where everyone else recognizes and celebrates that you're on the team, and you get the actual jersey.
And it's a commitment that everyone else makes to help you be
and everyone else sees you and says, I'm going to be your teammate and you're going to be my teammate. And now you're joining the team. Okay. So when you're a baby, the goal, here's what I say. So you're on the team now, you got to get out on the field and play. And so when you're a baby, guess what? Your parents are carrying you. You're on the field, you got your jersey, but you're on the field. And then as you get older, you start walking, your parents are holding your hand or other people are holding your hands, helping you kind of navigate and learn the game for yourself. And at some point, you let go of your parents' hands and you're playing on your own on the field and you're on the team. You're in the game. Well, here's the thing. You might decide that you don't want to play anymore and you decide to go sit on the bench, or
take off your
jersey and you get out of the stadium. Guess what? God never kicks you off the team. You are never, ever, ever kicked off the team. So you never have to get back on the team. You just get to choose if you ever come back to play. And so we don't rebaptize, but we remember our baptism, and we receive people who want to have their baptism remembered because they're ready to get back on the field and play. And so that's how I explain it. I just talk about it as you're already on the team.
It's great.
Baptism is the jersey presentation where everybody celebrates and everybody publicly witnesses you being on the team, and you're never kicked off the team ever.
Totally.
Even if you choose not to play anymore. So.
Well, and it provides the breadth of, I think, that analogy or metaphor provides space for the breadth of what God is doing, right? Because there are moments in our lives where we want forgiveness or we desperately need it, and maybe we haven't been baptized. And so, forgiveness of sins, it's in our liturgy. We believe that. But it's not just past sins. It's also the notion of like being on the team as a place of perpetual forgiveness and grace, right?
Yes.
So, but there's also the aspect of having an identity and being claimed by God publicly, us acknowledging that claiming, right? And so, the challenge, I think, is for so many who've grown up in the United States and in American Western Christianity, baptism's only been associated with like sin and being made clean, but that cuts, I think, against what we see in the Gospels. And while there aren't a huge number of scriptures we can point to show, to validate maybe infant baptism, there are some. What we're missing is why is Christ baptized, right? Why is Christ baptized?
Yeah, I was about to say, baptism is, again, like we talked, Christ instituted the act of Holy Communion, right? That dinner, the Last Supper. But Christ actually goes and receives baptism. Like that's not something he institutes.
And he doesn't do it to himself.
Exactly. He doesn't do it. He receives it. Somebody else baptizes Jesus.
And guess what happens right after his baptism?
Yeah.
God claims Christ, right? Claims Jesus as his son, right?
Yeah.
Who he is well pleased in.
In
happens.
a couple of the Gospels, it's audible to everyone, and in a couple of the Gospels, it's not audible. But yes,
that same claiming is what happens when we baptize an infant, right?
Yeah.
It's that God was already claiming that child, but it is that public mark, that public act that opens up the community in powerful ways.
Yeah. It opens it up and invites people in. It meets people where they are. I think one of the most important things, I always talk about this, that just because someone can't profess faith does not mean that they don't deserve to be claimed publicly by God and by a community. And because whether it's a child or whether it's someone who is nonverbal or whether it's someone who can't ever like mentally comprehend what's happening. And let's be honest, can any of us? No. Remember, sacrament is still mystery. So can any of us fully comprehend what's happening? No. But if someone has not that capacity, they still are claimed by name, by the community, and we celebrate that God has claimed them as well.
And they have the same spot, right? They have the same
access the same experience,
God's grace,
exactly,
the same ability to be a part of the community regardless of ability. So like I think that it's really important for us to be careful about requiring too much of someone for baptism.
Yeah, I don't connect baptism only with that moment of justification, right? That moment of like confession and forgiveness
and recognition of Jesus.
Exactly. Like is that there? Yes. Like we have profession of faith at every baptism. When it's an infant, like I said, you're being carried by your parents or by your sponsors or by your loved ones who profess their faith, and you then are baptized into this faith that they profess and claimed by this faith they profess in the community in which they are professing it.
Right.
But God's already claimed you. You're already known. You're already loved. You're already forgiven. Like you don't have to do anything. But it's this this active, outside, visible ritual act that we use these things like water, and we symbolize, we use laying on of hands, and we do this because it symbolizes what we believe God is doing and will continue to do in your life. So I mean, it's funny, I also talk to kids and I'm like, we talk about remembering our baptism, and kids will be like, well, I don't remember when I was baptized because I was a baby. And I'm like, that's okay. All you have to do is know that you were baptized. And you can always reclaim that. And you can always go back to that, like that knowledge of what happened. You don't actually have to remember the thing itself. No. You can just know that it happened.
Remember that you were baptized.
Weren't there when Jesus, did the Last Supper, but we read the stories and we remember that it happened.
Well, and to help that at our church, we have candles that are lit, and we encourage families to light that candle
Yeah.
on the anniversary of
The baptism.
And so there are small ways we can remember. We also have orders of worship and liturgies that actively engage in that, coming out forward and touching the water or interacting with the font. And so and one of my favorite things is a lot of Catholic or Episcopal churches have the font
ever
at
present.
the back.
Oh yeah,
where
and always there. Yeah,
you're always passing it as you
coming
go out
in and going out. Yeah.
And so I think like that is there are multiple ways we can remember. It is not necessary to remember our baptism for it to be validated. What is necessary is that the community remembers its role in the baptism, and so we pass that off to one another, right? And as we join churches or find a new church, right, it's important to recognize that we carry our baptismal vows with us, and so we're making the same promises to kids we may not even know yet, to raise them up in the faith. And then that way it is our baptismal vows are very dynamic, because we either take them on behalf of our children or we make them on behalf of ourselves. But those vows are transferable wherever we go. Like that responsibility to resist evil, injustice, and oppression, or whatever forms it presents itself, right? To be open and willing to serve Christ through a church that's open to all people of ages, nations, and races, like to profess Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. That responsibility is a daily one, and it happens within a broader community. It doesn't happen by ourselves, and it certainly isn't something that that we need to like recommit to, because as we've said, God's the primary actor. God's at work at the very beginning. God's at work in our baptism. Sure, there are times we need help remembering, but we certainly don't need help in getting God to do it over for us.
So what do you say when someone asks if baptism is necessary for salvation?
No.
Yeah. But how do you explain that?
Well, I mean, I would point back, to some more episodes around heaven and hell and salvation, but I essentially believe that baptism is not necessary for salvation, in the sense of like, if we're thinking of salvation as the thing we experience when we die, but if we want to experience the fullness of who God is, if we want to experience heaven here, if we want to have the deepest relationships with the church and with God, then I think maybe it is necessary, right? Like I don't know how we flourish as Christians and not be baptized, but I don't think that we're punished when we die if we haven't been baptized. Does that make sense? So
like not being baptized doesn't keep us from God.
Doesn't keep us from God's grace.
Right.
But being baptized, it's like jumping into the deep end.
Yeah.
You can sit on the side of the pool all you want, but it's more fun in the water, right? So like the truth is, like, are you punished because you didn't get in? No. Are you missing out because you don't participate in that communal act of baptism? I'd say yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you don't have a community that has made that public vow like we do every time we baptize someone in our church. The congregation responds. You don't have that person, that you don't have that experience of the whole church saying, yeah, we're on the same team as you and we've got your back.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, there is something to be said for like these consistent ritual acts that we participate in that bind us to each other.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like,
powers
can you,
in the repetition, right?
Well, and there's power in this, like in this ritual that doesn't happen in any other way. I mean,
yeah, totally.
I mean, like, can you be in a committed relationship without getting married? Yeah, sure. But there's power in that moment of ritual, of standing there and pledging your vows to each other. So totally. I would say that there's power then. Can you be in a relationship with God without being baptized? Sure, but why wouldn't you just be baptized then? Why wouldn't you be part of this community and kind of claim this identity and have it claimed for you? And
And I totally respect those that have come, that may be continuing guests or like new visitors or whatever, folks who
are exploring and
like,
inquiring.
I don't know about this thing. Like, I'm not going to.
Oh, yeah, totally.
When we got to get you baptized, right? But for those who are actively engaged in the life of the church and community and have not yet been baptized, I would ask them to spiritually explore that, right? Where's that barrier? Is it a feeling of unworthiness? Is it a feeling of being unnecessary? Is it a confusion about what it is? Because
I just don't want to do it because everyone else did it.
That would be me. Yeah.
Good thing that you already were baptized as a baby.
So
you couldn't resist.
I couldn't resist God's grace. Irresistible. But
just kidding. No, we don't believe that.
No, we don't. We actually believe in free will. Well, go back and listen to the whole episode. I just think that, that's a place of good conversation for a pastor to have with someone, but I don't think it's necessary for salvation if we want to use classical definitions of salvation. Right. But I do think it's necessary if you want to live the good life.
I feel like when I think about water too, or when we talk about water, some people are really nervous about like the water part of this. Baptism, the word, we haven't even talked about this yet, but the word comes from the Greek word baptisma, which means immersion or dipping in water. You got to dip. Mm-hmm. So, and yet we don't require that.
We don't require full immersion. No.
In the United Methodist Church, because again, for us, water is a symbol. It's not about how much water is there.
Totally.
And so whether it's like a dunking or a pouring or a sprinkling or, again, whatever water, it's
totally. We do immersive baptisms.
Oh yeah. Just like we do believers baptisms.
Right.
We'll baptize you if you're an adult and you're coming up and you're like linking this moment with a profession of faith.
It'll be a beautiful moment.
Yeah. Powerful. Love it. And we baptize infants and we baptize people because again, it's this outside act that we believe God is doing. And so, I love the idea of, I love using water. I love talking about water, what water means. I love that you're already on the team and God never kicks you off the team.
Totally.
I love like jump on in, the water's fine. And let's have fun and let's be in this and doing this thing together. I love that. And so I think baptism it's powerful and important. And I think we participate in it over and over again. We remember it over and over again. And we're always called to live out the vows of baptism.
Absolutely.
As the Christian community, for sure.
Absolutely. It's a good place to end because we're taking a little break.
We are.
A little summer break.
I'm going to go have fun in the sun.
And do a lot of work around Job.
Yes, I am so excited.
So the plan is, we're going to take a little break. Then we're going to come back in August.
Yes.
And we're going to tackle some things around doctrine and dogma and creeds.
And then some other good stuff.
Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
Totally. We got to before the election. We have to do it.
Okay, we'll do it. But yeah, during the month of July, we're going to be like preaching on Job.
Yeah.
The book of Job.
It's going to be awesome.
I know. I'm really excited. We're going to do some like Bible study curriculum along with it. And
some really good stuff. Maybe we'll pop up a bonus episode just on Job. Just for funsies.
Just in
case we miss the format too much,
Oh my gosh. It's good.
What a great first season of Howdy Theologian then.
I know. We did
covered
it.
a lot of ground.
Yeah, we did.
All right. There's a lot more to go.
All right.
We'll see you in a few weeks. I'm Reverend Mitchell Boone.
And I'm Reverend Elizabeth Moseley. And thanks for listening to Howdy Theologian, a podcast for all who want to better understand the words we use and how they fit into a progressive theological context in today's world.
We're pastors at First United Methodist Church of Dallas, and you can find us worshiping in person or online on Sunday mornings. Follow our church on socials for more awesome content, and make sure to subscribe and share with your friends.